Hello there, and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Yarnspirations.com. In this video, I will show you how to make the Sunset Song knit cowl. This is one of my own designs, and I've kept it very simple and perfect for the beginner knitter or super simple and easy go-to project for the experienced knitter. This cowl uses 2 balls of my very own yarn, Chic Sheep by Marley Bird. It is a perfect cowl to put around your neck, wear it out as an accessory to your outfit, or just to keep the chill off your neck when you're wearing your coat. This is a free pattern at Yarnspirations.com. You can find a link to the pattern in the video description box right down there below, and while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. In the pattern, you will find a full list of the materials needed, but why don't I go ahead and just give you a glimpse of what you need right here. I've already mentioned that you need the 2 balls of Chic Sheep, which is a worsted weight yarn. You will need a pair of size 9 24-inch circular needles, a stitch marker, a tapestry needle, and a good pair of scissors. This right here is a nifty little stitch marker that my assistant made me that I will be using in the video. It helps you keep track of the rows, not just the stitches. So I will show you how that works as we begin this cowl project. Go ahead, get your free pattern, grab your materials, and I will get you started on this really fantastic cowl. This cowl is made in the round, which means there is no seam for you to worry about. It is also worked up in the basket weave stitch, which is just the combination of purls and knits. Every 4 rows you switch it up, and you would put the purls on top of the knits and the knits on top of the purls, which gives you this really great look. On the bottom and the top of the cowl, you can see I just made the ribbing a very large ribbing to mimic the same stitch count as the body of the cowl, which makes it a very nice and easy transition. This cowl pattern is an 8-stitch repeat and an 8-row repeat. The hardest part is going to be remembering when it's time to change up those stitches so that you get that basket weave look. And that's where that little row counter that my assistant made me is going to come into play, but we'll get to that. For almost all of my patterns, I prefer to begin with a long tail cast on. So you do want to make sure that you have sectioned off enough length of the tail to accommodate the 112 stitches we will cast on. I do like to begin with a slip knot, so I'm going to put a slip knot directly onto my needle, and then I will begin my long tail cast on. It really is very simple. If you have a cast on that you prefer, you can absolutely do that. You don't need to do a long tail cast on if you don't want to. I do like the stability of the long tail cast on, and if you will take the time to learn it, you will eventually fall in love with it as well. So go ahead and get 112 stitches cast on to your needle. Once you get all of your stitches cast on, it's important you make sure that you do not have a twist in the cast on. This is one of the reasons I like the long tail, is it gives you this really nice edge here that you can look at to see if any of your stitches are twisted. You can see here I have my nice edge all on the inside of my needle. They aren't twisted, and I can go ahead, position my stitches so that way I'm ready to begin working in the round. Now, if you've never worked in the round before, there's a couple things I want to point out. First off, when you're working in the round, all of your stitches that are sitting here on your cord, they're just hanging out there. You don't have to worry about that at all. As you work the stitches and it transfers from one needle to the next, they'll just naturally begin to work in a spiral and begin to always come up and be ready for you. You just are just shoving them around essentially. The other thing is when you pick up your work, you want to think of it as the public side of your work is always facing you. So if I picked up my work here, you can see with my long tail cast on, I have those nice sort of purl bumps on the back side of that ridge. That would be the inside of my cowl. And out here, you can see I have the nice ridge here that would just, those actually are knits. So that will be the outside of my cowl. So when I begin working, it's essentially all of my stitches that are over here on this cord. those are over there just waiting. In the inside here, those are the inside of my cowl. On the outside, those are the outside of my cowl. I also want to make sure that because I'm working in the round, my yarn here is coming out the back of my needle and it's not like entwined inside here. So let me show you. Sometimes you'll find people who will start knitting like this and then they pull and see how it's now inside my circle. It's a pain in the rear. So don't do that. You want to make sure that your yarn is outside of the circle, okay? So it's outside of the circle. The last thing is that we want to put a marker here to signify that this is the start of our round. So I like to make my own markers, so I stick a marker on there. It's nice and sparkly. It makes me happy. And I'm ready to just begin knitting. And there is no extra special work you have to do here to begin working in the round. The first time I ever worked in the round, I didn't know that. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to work in the round, but it really is just as simple as begin working. Now this first couple stitches, they might be a little bit loose, but don't worry about it. We will tighten them up when everything is complete. I'm simply like, look at this. My yarn is on my needle in my right hand. This is the very first stitch that I put on my needle. So that is my slip knot stitch. I will go into that stitch and simply knit it. Now I've joined to work in the round. My two pieces are together. I want to knit 4 stitches. This is the beginning of our 8-stitch repeat. So 3 and 4. Now it's time to purl 4. So I'll bring my yarn between my needles to the front and I will purl 4 stitches. You see that? See how that works? So now I have 4 knit stitches, 4 purl stitches. And I would continue doing this all the way around, and that would be 1 round. So once you get done with the purls, you go ahead, move your yarn back between your needles, back to the back of the work, so that way it's back there ready for you to knit 4. And if you ever get lost, always look here, find your purl bump. There's my last purl bump. So I can see I did 1, 2, 3 knits. And there's the 4th knit. Bring my yarn between my needles and purl 4. Now, because I wanted my bottom ribbing and my top ribbing to look different from the body of the cowl, I chose to do this series of knit 4, purl 4 for a total of 8 rounds, okay? What that essentially means is I've doubled up what I normally would do for the body of the pattern. In the body of the pattern, we would do our knit 4, purl 4 for 4 rounds, and then we would switch that up and go purl 4, knit 4 for 4 rounds. Can you see what I mean here? So what is the most important thing for you to remember from this point on, besides just knowing how to knit and how to purl, is how to count. You have to know how to count your rounds, okay? So let's go ahead, bring in a sample that I've already got started worked up, and the ribbing portion is already complete. We're going to jump into the body of the fabric, and we're going to learn how to begin to count our rounds so that way we don't get off track when we're working the basket weave on the body of our cowl. Okay, so I have already worked up all of the ribbing portion for the bottom part of my cowl. Can you see here, those are my 4 knits. These are my 4 purls, okay? And I'm ready to jump into the body. Well, when I jump into the body portion, all that means is instead of starting off with 4 knits and then going to 4 purls, I will begin with 4 purls and then go into 4 knits. And I will do that for 4 rounds. Now, if I'm not very good at counting my rounds, I can use this little tool that my assistant made me. Can you see this little piece? This is so cool. I can put a marker on my needle, okay, they're all attached, for each round I complete. So that way I can put it on here for the first round. When I complete it, I'll put it on there for the second round. When I complete it, I'll put it on there for the third. When I complete it, I'll put it on there for the fourth. When I get done with the 4th round, I then would change the body stitches and switch it up and go back to knit 4 and then purl 4, it makes it very easy to remember, especially if I happen to put down my work, pick it up later and forget how or what row I'm on. I can use my counter to know exactly where I am. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to change colors here so that way you can see the stitches that I'm creating. It also will show you how to change to a new ball of yarn when it's time to do that. You can see here I've cut my yarn. I've left 6 inches so that way I have a nice amount of yarn to weave in later. And I like to take my new ball of yarn and I just tie it around my old ball of yarn, my old color. And I just pull that right up to my needles, okay? When I go to weave in these ends, I will undo that little tie there. The tie just keeps my yarn in place and it helps me maintain control of the color change there, or not my color change, but my yarn change. Because for you, if you're not changing color, you're just adding a new ball of yarn, it'll be the same color. But you can see what I mean here. All right, so I'm going to remove this marker because I really don't need it because I'm going to now use this marker. But it's the same idea. I'm going to place this directly onto my needle. It's now a marker on my stitches to indicate the start of the round. Now I go ahead and jump into my stitch pattern. So the stitch pattern changes here for the body. I will be purling 4, and then I will knit 4. Can you see already? It changes up what the stitches are going to look like. And I will do this all the way around. So I will purl 4, and I will knit 4. Pretty easy stuff. Purl, knit. I'm going to do this all the way around and get back to the start where my marker is. I am coming up to my marker here. It means I'm at the end of my round, so I would switch my marker, and typically I would just move my marker over there, right? Which is what I'm going to do, only this time I'm going to drop it down. So now that the loop on my needle is also the one just above the number 2, which lets me know I'm on my second round. So the second round is the same as the first because the first 4 rounds are all the same. And I would just jump in and I would purl 4 and then jump into my knit 4. And what you will begin to see once you get to this round is all of the stitches really start to look really different from the ribbing that we did at the beginning. And so you begin to really see the pattern emerge here. All right, can you see this? Look, you can see those knits starting to really take shape above the purls, and those purls take shape above the knits. It's pretty easy stuff. The biggest thing to remember here as you're working on this cowl is this. When you transition from a knit to a purl, always bring your yarn between your needle and then purl, okay? The other thing is when you transition from a purl to a knit, bring your yarns between the needle and then knit. A helpful hint here is when you're transitioning from a knit to a purl, bring your yarn between your needle, and when you purl that first stitch and off, take your yarn back between your needles and give it a tug, and then bring it back and do it again on the second one. What that does is it tightens up that knit stitch that's right before the purl you did. Can you see down here on my ribbing where this is really loose right there? And that was when I transitioned from a knit to a purl. But see how it's nice and snug up here on those two? That's because I started to tighten up that purl stitch after I worked it on the final couple rounds. Can you see there? See, they're really loose and then they're snug again. And then they're really loose, and then they're snug up here where I started to tighten it up. So if you want your stitches to look nice and snug in the knits when you transition from a knit to a purl, it's very important that you just give that little extra tug. And what it does is it pulls slack from the transition from a knit to a purl. Okay, so I just knit those. Bring my yarn forward. I will purl this one. And then I just give it a little pull. See how much slack that gives? I'm going to do that one more time so you can see here. I'm going to purl it. Let me move this so you can see. Take it off. I'm going to move this back. Watch all the slack I pull. You see how much slack that pulls? And that really tightens up the knit stitch on this side of the purl. Okay? And then to keep that purl nice and snug, not only do I hold on to it, but on the next purl, I do the same thing, just to give it a nice tight snug. So that's something that you can do just to make your work a little bit more uniform. Regarding this little nifty gadget here, I do have an entire blog post about this. It is so handy. You can make yourself one without any trouble. But if you don't have this, it's okay. You can still just use a regular old stitch marker and then get a piece of paper or use your favorite app that helps you count rows just to do a tick mark. So that way you know every 4 rows or rounds, these would be rounds, you have to transition and change from starting off with 4 knits to 4 purls, okay? Because it's just the combination of those 2 stitches that gets this really unique cowl. I also want to remind you, I only changed colors that way you could see the difference between the 2 stitches. And I wanted to show you how you would join your second ball of yarn. Along with this, I want you to see here, I had to cut out a knot in my yarn right here, and I joined the same way right down here. And the reason I'm pointing it out is if you happen to come across a knot or a flub or anything like that in any yarn you're ever using, you should always cut it out and rejoin your yarn. You don't want to have that knot or that flub in your knitting because it's just unsightly. So that's just a little tip from me to you to make sure that your knitting is beautiful for all time. And then if we look down here at the cowl once again, you can see that the transition right here from the knits to the purls, gives you this really great basket weave look. The nice ribbing at the bottom and the top just delineate the difference of those 2 sections just enough, but it's still a nice morph into the body of the work. This is one of my favorite colors. It's called Sunset, hence the name of the cowl. It's called the Sunset Song Knit Cowl. I love this. I think you will too. This will be one of those very easy go-to projects because you can very quickly remember where you are in the pattern just by looking at your work, looking whether you're knitting or purling, and then knowing how many rows you've done. You can make this cowl as large or as small as you wish. Just remember it is an 8 stitch and an 8 row repeat. So make the cowl as tall as listed in the pattern or taller or shorter. All depends on your preference. Just remember if you do make it bigger, you will need more yarn. All right, that's it. That's the lovely cowl here. I hope you will run out, grab the pattern, get the materials, make this cowl. If you do, please share with me on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag Yarnspirations so that way I can see your beautiful finished project and smash your like button. I'm Marley Bird, and I will talk to you again very soon. Bye.